G'day YouTube, how the heck are we doing? It is Foul Play here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the semi-final match between Benton Madsen and Takumi. This is going to be a breakdown from a Bogle expert, and tomorrow we're going to check out the one for between Reed Duke and Benton as well. So I hope you enjoy the video, guys. Alright, game number one here. Alright, so Benton on the play, given the overall standings at the end of the league. Leading over Branchwood Pathway into Glade Cover Scout. And that is a recruitment officer from Takumi. So here Benton has a little bit of a think during his second turn. He's weighing up his options onto whether or not to erase with the scout as is, or to commit the light paws onto the battlefield. And here we see light paws committed. There's some decent upside to playing light paws this turn. It helps you play around turn one Brutal Cathar, so it forces your opponent to have ossification on the spot. Now, given Takumi's weaker one drop, it's quite possible that he's actually holding that, and it turns out that's exactly what he's got, so light paws gets exiled away. I feel like this is a decent light to go to though, because if you untap on turn 3 with light paws, and get to unload 2 to 3 auras on your scout, the 2 to 3 free auras on light paws, it's probably a very winning position, and for the most part it's worth going for a win like that. Additionally, tempo wise, you only lose out 2 mana to your opponent's 2 mana, so it negates out quite nicely. Alright, and we see Mana Confluence as the mana source there. Benton is now going to play SRAM, Senior Edificer. So whenever an aura is played, Benton gets to draw a card. It's a bit of an interesting line, because if you're expecting removal, you can like weigh up which one of these creatures to gamble on. With this list that Benton was running, it is fairly creature heavy. So you do need to make the most of your auras, and the 2 creatures that do that are light paws and SRAM. So sequencing is important, but I feel like Benton was going for the basically free win on turn 2. So here we can see Benton using that Mana Confluence to cast Cartouche of Solidarity, getting that card trigger off of SRAM. So Cartouche is quite nice because it does give you that Vigilance token, and this is going to shut off your opponent's recruitment officer and help preserve a clock. So while Benton can attack, Takumi wastes a pretty large creature resource attacking into the warrior token. Alright, so here we can see a land drop into Adeline for Takumi. Adeline, pardon me. So that's just the key text on Adeline. Whenever you attack for each opponent, create a 1/1 human token that's tapped and attacking. Alright. So now we see an Audacity on the Glade Cover Scout, draw trigger on the light paws. Now the Scout has First Strike Trample and is a 4/2. And this is where the hurt really comes out, and it's quite an interesting line because he actually casts Ethereal Armor onto the warrior token. I think this is quite an interesting line though, because obviously the faster clock is on the Scout. You can just throw down on the Scout pretty much every aura and attack in this first game and mostly beat Takumi. He's really respecting his own life total by putting this Ethereal Armor on the warrior token, meaning get to attack with that Vigilance creature, and making it almost impossible for Takumi to attack back. The downside to this is the warrior token's very vulnerable to removal, such as the ossification that we saw on turn 2 or Brutal Cathar, which we will be seeing later. It's possible that the reason Benton's done this is to bait the Brutal Cathar, and that later on he's just like clearing the way so that he can just finish off Takumi. Alright, so now we see Benton doing some math before his combat. Both the Scout and the Warrior have 4 power and First Strike, with the Scout having the Trample as well. If Ben attacks with the Scout in this spot, he'll deal First Strike damage to the recruitment officer first, and then the Adeline afterwards. As it is though, a bit more action before combat. We see Ethereal Armor, draw a card. This Ethereal Armor on the Glade Cover Scout. Now Scout's absolutely enormous. And there's another aura to come down. So this is going to be Kai's ghost form. And this is an interesting one. Going to protect the SRAM there. Now, Kai's ghost form is quite interesting because if there's any other auras enchantment, when the Kai's ghost form trigger has, it'll just fall, all other auras will fall off when the creature returns. So you do have to be a little bit careful while playing with this card. Currently, the Glade Cover Scout is attacking for 9. Takumi does chump block the warrior token, so blocking out 5 damage there. 6 damage, pardon me. So that's Takumi down to 9. Obviously, this is a pretty menacing board state to deal with currently. One of the main reasons this like huge tempo swim has occurred, by the way, is Takumi's only been able to cast 1 spell a turn every turn, where Benton sit his land drops in perfect order, and he's gotten all that card advantage of the SRAM and is in a really good spot. So we do see the Brutal Cathar taking away that ethereal armor, or taking away the warrior token, and the ethereal armor falls to the graveyard. Still, Scout is very, very large. All right, and here we see a light pause, and the absolute hurt comes down here. Ben Madsen's got another aura to follow up. So then he gets a trigger off of both the SRAM and the light pause. So the SRAM trigger has to be done first. You get the card draw while the cast effect is on the stack. This spell's on the stack. The Audacity resolves, light pause trigger happens. And then we just easily search up the Hammerhand. That's going to give light pause haste, and it's also going to take away a blocker for Takumi. So the Glade Cover Scout, 12th power on its own. Attacking wide with the other 2 creatures as well. SRAM at 2/2 and light pause at 3/3. So that's game 1 that's been taken. So as far as sideboarding is concerned, you definitely want your Hushbringers here. They're just a little bit of an all-star. I'd also say there's a pretty strong consideration for Rune of Sustenance and Warbriar Blessing. Rune of Sustenance replaces itself as well as giving that life gain stack, and Warbriar Blessing helps control the battlefield by fighting and picking off an opponent's creature. Both of these trigger SRAM and light pause, which is the idea of the deck. Now, Portable Hole is more of an interesting one. Takumi is going to be bringing in his own copies of Portable Hole in this matchup. And additionally, this could help deal with annoying creatures like Hopeful Initiative, which can blow up your enchantments. I think this could potentially be overboarding, and something you definitely don't want to do when you're playing a hexproof deck is overboard, because you're basically a combo deck, and the more pieces you take out, the weaker your synergies become. Sideboarding is also, as far as sideboarding things out are concerned, a bit of an interesting one. I think we could safely take out 1 Griff Spoon. The Generous Visitors are interesting because after an enchantment is removed, the counter would stay, assuming that counter is on a hexproof creature, such as Glade Cover Scout, and not on one of your big 2-drops. However, I do think it's one of the weaker cards remaining in the list, and additionally there is All That Glitters that you could probably take 2 copies out for the Rune of Sustenance and the Warbriar Blessing. Overall, I think our sideboarding probably looks a little bit something like this, although there's possibly an argument to keep the Griff Spoon in instead of the Portable Hole. There's also potential to bring in the Besaju from the sideboard as well. Alright, so here we are for game number 2 now, and this time Takumi is going to be on the play. We have no information about hands currently. We see a Hopeful Initiative from Takumi, and that's one of the better ones because that does interact with enchantments. It can remove counters from any of the humans, not just itself, making it a pretty strong threat. into Generous Visitor, and Benton does seem to think that Generous Visitor is worth keeping, and contrary to my assessment earlier on. So Glade Cover Scout with the Ethereal Armor as well, the extra 1/1 counter off the Visitor. Alright, and now we see Brutal Cathar, stripping away that Generous Visitor. The Glade Cover Scout's still a 3/3, so no attacks are going to be had on Takumi's end. Excellent. I see a Sentinel's Eyes in Benton's hand there. Getting Vigilance in this matchup is pretty strong. Alright, not surprisingly, Sentinel's Eyes does get cast. So Scout's currently a 5/5. An extra mana up, and potentially an extra one in hand as well. Just a Skrelv. Alright, so we missed the land drop there. 3 cards in hand currently for Benton. And a Skrelv on the other side for Takumi. So the wording on Skrelv is another target creature you gain Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color until end of turn. The color you choose, that is. It can't be blocked by creatures of that color. So you can't do this as a combat trick. You have to do this prior to blockers. Alright, and after a wide amount of math from Benton, we see Light Paws getting cast down. So it's going to create a threat for the following turn. And even if it gets removed, it's going to eat up a decent portion of Takumi's mana. The Glade Cover Scout is a 5/5 Vigilance First Strike. So the downside on activating Skrelv is it removes a potential protection for the Light Paws from the ossification from the Brutal Cathar. He does actually decide to attack in for that 5 damage. Takumi down to 10. And no blocks to be had at that point. We have to remember as well this Hopeful Initiative is just slowly ticking up, getting those auras, and it's got the active for 3 or 4 mana from memory. Okay, and we see Brutal Cathar is flipped. That's pretty wild. I haven't seen that too often. There's that wording on Hopeful Initiative. So that's at 3 mana in total. Alright, and now we see a 3rd land drop for Benton. Interestingly enough, on the attacking side of things, Takumi has put up a slightly more resolute defense. The Brutal Cathar has been flipped, so it is now a red creature, so Skrelv can't quite do its thing. However, we see all that glitters now from Benton Madsen with the Light Paws trigger. I don't believe Takumi has any spells that cast at instant speed. So you've got your pick of your litter here if you're Benton. Your choices are you could tutor for evasion, such as Griff Spoon. We've currently got soft evasion through the Skrelv though. I think probably either getting the life gain from Rune of Sustenance or going for Warblight Blessing, potentially fighting the Hopeful Initiative and controlling that board state could also be a consideration. Unfortunately, the opponent has their own Skrelv, so we're not going to be able to do that. So Benton's actually just searched up an enchantment that he can't search up because all the glitters, the Light Paws trigger can only search up enchantments that are not currently on the battlefield, and Ethereal Armor is on the Scout. So we do see Cartouche of Solidarity, and Takumi lets Benton swap it over. I'm sure if he got a little bit petty with a judge in that situation, you could just fizzle the trigger altogether, I believe. I'm not entirely sure on the ruling of that, but it's good to see some quick and resolute sportsmanship. Alright, so Hopeful Initiative active has happened. All the glitters is removed. So Glade Cover Scout currently a 6/6. We should note as well that All That Glitters does actually give an extra point of damage than the Ethereal Armor, because Skrelv does have artifact typing, and All That Glitters buffs off artifacts as well. Converse to that, Ethereal Armor has that first strike stat, so I think Ethereal Armor is actually the stronger effect because it makes it harder to trade with the Scout. But Yes, Takumi's plan is probably to tick up this initiative, hopeful initiative again, do the active again, and then you're pretty happy. Maybe you hit a land drop, a 1-drop creature, and get enough counters onto the battlefield. So now we see ossification on the Skrelv. Wow, that's a pretty funky one. Okay. So that is Takumi tapped out. That is a light pause remaining on the battlefield. So I guess at that point, Takumi is playing around the block denial on these white creatures, on these red creatures. It's sort of an interesting line. He's probably assuming that he's dead to A, Audacity, or B, Griffspoon, and he's just going to assume that Benton bricks on those. Alright, so now that we see in all that glitters over there, there is a Thalia on the board, so that did cost 3 to cast. All that glitters on the light pause, the Griffspoon as well. Takumi only on floor life, so that flying is going to go through. That's going to be well and truly lethal. Alright, now game number 3. So Takumi with a mulligan to 6, starting on a Mutavault as a land source. That's a little bit of a rough one there, really. We do see Razor Verge Thicket, that nice free land there, into Gladecover Scout. Damn, these are pretty good starts. The Scouts are just such a safe creature in this matchup. There's only 4 hexproof creatures like this in the deck, and he's had it 3 games in a row. Alright, and Ethereal Armor on the Scout. Is this straight into an Audacity? Okay, a Cartouche of Solidarity. So that's going to be a 4/4 first striker with the Vigilance token off to the side. And a nice straightforward attack to kick things off. Oh, you can see there, Ben has got Griffspoon in hand as well. A Skrelv of his own. So plenty of good stuff. Everything you need to get to the races, right? Alright, Warrior token. Chumped out, removing the opponent's Skrelv. We see a Danaline there. A creature can get pretty big pretty quick. So given how stacked Ben's hand is, you probably just want to hit a land drop so you can curve out with tempo, play all your spells. As it is, we see Griffspoon ×2. There's only 2 copies of this card in the deck. That's not one that's removed either. That's an attack for 8. That's unblockable. And I mean, this is a menacing clock. Takumi has to get there. Straight into a Skrelv off of the Temple Garden. And now if Takumi could interact with 1 Griffspoon, he's still not going to be able to block. There's the second Griffspoon. There's the Skrelv. This is just a lock here at this point. Given Ben's life total is 17 and Takumi's life state is board state is so small. Supportable Hole on the Ethereal Armor. Brutal Cathar on the Skrelv. I mean, that has controlled the board state. That's still going to be an attack for 4. And Gladecover Scout is still very, very close to getting there with lethal. But all of a sudden, there is a very large board state on Takumi's side. So it does have to be exactly Ethereal Armor or all that glitters here to have lethal in the air. Any other singular aura, even Audacity, is going to fall short on damage. Oh. See, is he packing the Besagers here and getting that Ethereal Armor back? He is too. It's a pretty strong play, and that's going to be game. That is the semi-finals concluded. So those were really, really good games there from Benton, and that was quite the enjoyable match. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. As we all know, he's made it onto the finals, and he does verse Reed Duke. I'm sure a lot of you know the result of that game already, but for those of you that don't, I won't spoil it for you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to catch that action tomorrow. And as always, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Comments are good for the YouTube algorithm. Till next time, guys, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you then.